Have you ever started something new with your partner, perhaps something like a guided intimacy session, and maybe you felt tension or distraction or this need to pull away? Well, that's called resistance, and it's actually quite common, and it happens in relationships more often than people actually realize. And so today I want to talk about some of the good news with resistance, and that is it's actually very natural. It's a very common part of being in a relationship. In fact, it's part of growth and it's part of intimacy. And so what I want to do today is I want to dedicate this episode to really defining what resistance is, why it happens, and how you can actually use it to deepen your relationship. So typically when we hear the word resistance in our culture today, it's sort of our go-to, kind of how we're wired, is we want to think that somebody's being difficult or not cooperative. But in the realm of intimacy, which is what we're going to be talking about, resistance is not that. In fact, it's not there to be oppositional. It's there to protect. So when you think about your body, your emotions, your mental state, if you're feeling like you're in a place where maybe you're vulnerable or not safe, again, it's not there to oppose, it's there to essentially protect. And so the sooner that we can acknowledge that reality, the better off we're going to be, particularly, again, in the realm of being in a relationship. All right, so when you think about resistance, it really kind of sort of boils down into three main ideas. It's the physical resistance, the emotional resistance, and the mental resistance. And those three things are actually going to make up sort of the cornerstone of what we're going to be talking about today. So let's talk about that first one, which is physical resistance. So physical resistance can show up in many different forms. So again, thinking about the realm of guided intimacy audio or even erotic audio, or again, you and your partner are engaging in this sort of session, how can physical resistance emerge and what does it look like? Well, as I mentioned, it can show up in many different forms. So it can show up as tension, it can show up as flinching, it can show up as maybe this desire from your partner of maybe their need to pull away. A good way to kind of think about that is maybe your partner looks like maybe they're in offline mode. But these little sort of reactions, they're all classic signs of physical resistance and things that you need to be attuned to, because if it does happen during, an audio session that you may be listening to, you've got to be aware. All right, so that's physical resistance. Let's talk about the next one, which is emotional resistance. So emotional resistance is going to look a little bit different. So this could be a sudden wave of emotions that you might see represented from your partner. It could be feelings of sadness. It could be feelings of frustration or anger. Really, again, it's emotional resistance. So it's going to be anything that is emotional. What are other things that could trigger this? Maybe you're listening to an audio session and something triggers them from their past. So it could be a memory that's sparking that emotion. So again, these are all signs that you need to be aware of when partaking in any audio session. So one, are you seeing physical resistance? And if you're not seeing that, are you seeing sort of signs here of emotional resistance? All right, let's talk about the third one, which is mental resistance. So mental resistance can show up in many forms, just like the others. And again, and something I need to mention here, this can happen with you or it can happen with your partner. And that includes the two that we were talking about earlier. Again, whether it's physical resistance or emotional resistance. So again, impacts everybody. But if you're in this camp or your partner's in this camp, typically what will happen here is you're essentially stuck in your head. All right, so you've got thoughts that just won't die off. They're sort of dominating, the bandwidth in your brain. It's overanalyzing, it's overthinking, and ultimately it's this struggle to actually listening to what's actually happening, to actually being in that present moment. So if you are listening to a guided intimacy session, your head's not listening to the guide, your head is somewhere else. So that is mental resistance. All right, so what have we talked about so far? We've talked about three sort of resistant categories, right, or resistance items here. That being, again, physical resistance, emotional resistance, and mental resistance. So now that we're equipped with this knowledge, what do you do about it? So when resistance shows up, here's what you do. You don't push through it. In fact, that's the last thing you should do. So if you do push through it, all you're doing is you're just creating pressure. Instead, pause and acknowledge what's happening. So if it's physical resistance, emotional resistance, mental resistance, whether it's something that you're struggling with or your partner's struggling with, or maybe both of you are struggling with it, acknowledge that moment and then speak up. Have an open line of communication where you can say, hey, you know what? Struggling with this right now. Can we take a break? Can we revisit this evening? Can we revisit this tomorrow? Or maybe I just need 5 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it may be. But make sure you've got an open line of communication and talk about it. So it starts first with, G.I. Joe, knowing's half the battle. All right. So first, you got to understand that these three things happen, right? Resistance is a very common thing, again, with relationships. It's part of that growth process that we talked about earlier. So one is just having awareness. Know that these exist, and if they happen to emerge during a guided intimacy session, great, you're aware of it. Now focus on giving yourself the time and the space and the bandwidth to actually work on fixing it, or essentially hitting the reset button. And that's one of the things I love about guided intimacy, is that really at the end of the day, you're not stuck on this linear path, right? So if you're feeling off, or maybe you're feeling too much pressure, or just something, maybe there's just a disconnect, right? You can always hit pause and come back to it later. But the most beautiful thing in all of this is that going through experiences like this, having this self-awareness that we're talking about, you're gonna know what you want and what you don't want. And by having that awareness, that's growth. And that's a really beautiful thing. All right, so as we begin to wrap up, again, let's sort of remind ourselves of what we talked about here today. So ultimately, resistance, it's completely natural. It's a part of the human experience. It's part of relationships. It's part of intimacy. It's gonna be there. And how does it sort of reveal itself? Well, it's those three things that we've talked about already. There's going to be the physical resistance, there's going to be the emotional resistance, and there's going to be the mental resistance. And so once you're aware that these are there and that this is common, you can now navigate through it appropriately. So whether it's you personally dealing with them or your partner's dealing with them, you can help each other get through that season or that part of your relationship, where ultimately you're going to grow together. And your relationship is really essentially going to become deeper because of it. All right, so this channel is new, as you can probably imagine. So always appreciate the likes and the subscribes if you found that this content is helpful. Again, my goal here is to continue to empower you, particularly in the realm of guided intimacy. That's my specialty, that's my expertise. So I hope you found this video insightful. And so I'm going to wrap up with these words as usual. And remember this, intimacy is not automatic, it's guided.